solicit until people are bloody from too much solicitation. A couple of other information gathering examples. This is Cornell College, not Cornell University. This is Cornell College in deepest, darkest Iowa. A little school with a big idea. And every year, when it comes time for the senior class to graduate, they always formed up into a queue the last week. And you stopped at one table and you paid your overdue library book fines. And you then went to the next table and you got issued your cap and gown. And now you stop at a table and you complete your senior exit survey from Cornell College. And a lot of you probably do similar things where they want to know what's your forwarding address going to be, what's your email address going to be. If you have an employer, and we sure hope you do, can you tell us what your employment information is? Pretty standard stuff that I've seen for a long time. What I hadn't seen before is this next page, which says which faculty and staff were most influential to you while you were a student, which of your classmates were you closest friends with while you were a student on campus, which alumni activities might you be interested in volunteering for in the future. And this is a list that goes all the way down to the floor in terms of what student organizations were most meaningful to you while you were on campus. Now, for an annual giving guy, this is the answer book to everything that meant something to this person while they were a student on my campus. And we won't engage them at all until the day they graduate. And then we'll start spending a fortune trying to read their minds about what they might be interested to support us with for the annual fund. So, and in a paper-driven world, this would have been a summer intern's nightmare, right? To enter in all this paper information into the database, and oh, that's getting so old and it's covered with cobwebs. Why don't we just throw all that data out, right? Well, now I've got students actually telling me themselves at a keyboard, you know, what was most meaningful to them when they were a student at my institution. So this is interesting and data that I couldn't easily get to before, but now it's accessible to us. And it's the internet that not only allows me to capture it, but also allows me to go back to people when Professor Smith retires next year. I can go into the database and see everybody that just thought Professor Smith was the most inspirational darn professor ever. And I can email those people and say, would you like to make an annual fund gift in celebration of Professor Smith's career? It was so much more difficult to even know who that audience was, not to mention how do I even approach them. But now with email and the internet, it's not as daunting a proposition as it might have been a couple years ago. People ask me, well, what forces the students to fill out this survey? Well, the students are just trying to graduate. So they think, well, this is just one more thing I got to do. Okay, I'll tell you everything you want to know. It's just assumed that that's, you know, part of the process of getting through to graduation. And a lot of what we've done in annual giving for so long has been to try and make assumptions about the majority of the audience, right? We think most people are going to be interested in bursaries. We think most people are going to be interested in faculty support. And so we write our letters hoping that it sticks to the target for most people, right? And so this is interesting to me in really getting us closer to the point of understanding what really floats each individual person's boat. And I think that's an ability with the internet that we didn't have before, that I find very interesting in terms of where we're going in annual giving. Stanford University, also very annoying alumni population. And this is an example that I've been talking about for 10 years. And when it was your reunion year, remember the guy who got all teary-eyed because it was his reunion year at Stanford? One of the first things that happens is the alumni office at Stanford sends out this blank sheet of paper, which is your reunion biography form. And Stanford wants you to tell your story of what you've been doing in the years since you graduated from Stanford. And Stanford people just love this. And so they fill in this sheet, and some of them paste photos on the sheet. Some of them write poems about what they've been doing since they graduated. Some people draw in stick figures. You know, I met my wife here. We went on our honeymoon here. Here's us with the baby. You know, and they just really get into it. The Stanford people love the whole reunion biography thing. There was always a poor guy in the alumni office at Stanford whose job it was to then photocopy all these biography sheets as they came into the office. They would bind them into these thick books and send them out in advance of the reunion. So it became a motivating thing to come to reunion like they needed to at Stanford anyway. But you'd flip through the book and you'd say, oh, I didn't realize she got divorced, and I didn't realize he just became a multimillionaire. I think I'll go to my reunion this year at Stanford. Well, the whole reason this is here in a web discussion is because this paper process is now a completely online process. So you're looking at a virtual biography sheet that somebody at Stanford designed online in their alumni years. So you can see this even links to their MySpace profile. So what was a smart idea at Stanford, and by the way, it wasn't smart just because it boosted attendance at the reunion. You know, any prospect researcher at Stanford would love a page, you know, telling me what somebody's done since they graduated from Stanford and how much they give credit to Stanford for helping them acquire the skills that made them successful. And go back to the slide of people raising their hand. These are all the Stanford alumni who were raising their hand, saying, if you send me a blank sheet of paper, I love Stanford so much, I'm going to take the time to fill it out and send it back to you. So it's smart for Stanford to know, you know, who loves their relationship so much that, you know, I wouldn't ordinarily brag about myself. But since you asked me, let me tell you all the great things I've done with myself. And it's Stanford who, in part, gave me the skills to do that. So leave it to the smarty pantses in Silicon Valley, where Stanford is, to figure out, you know, how to take this paper-driven good fundraising idea and now make it a virtual online thing. And for some of you who make fun of Americans and their reunion culture, and you saw the Princeton thing at the beginning, I want to point out to you that there really isn't any requirement to have a reunion with this at all. And even if you've got alumni populations who took 4 years to graduate, or 5 years, or 6 years, or 10 years, or whatever, you know, this year on your database, there is still a group of people who graduated 10 years ago, or graduated 25 years ago. And you don't even have to call them the class of anything. You don't even have to invite them to a reunion. But I think it's still a great excuse for the institution to say, we know that you know that we know that you know that you graduated 25 years ago, and we'd like to hear your story. I'm not inviting you to anything. But if you'd like to tell me what you've been doing since you left, I'd like to hear that story. You know, we can all look different as institutions, but I think that anniversary year with our graduates gives us a really good excuse to engage them and just find out who raises their hand. You know, who's done well for themselves, who gives you some credit for it, and who wouldn't otherwise send in their alumni magazine update. But since you asked, let me tell you some of the great things that have happened to me over the years.